Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is currently Wednesday, October 12th, 2011. It's Day 9 Daily number 361, part 2. We're looking at mill.stephano and rgn.kiwikaki from IPL3. And, actually, hilariously enough, someone in chat was asking, where do you get the IPL3 replays? I don't actually know. I actually just Googled Stephano versus Kiwikaki replay, and it showed up on a replay site that I'd never heard of in my life. So there it is, if you want to find this game. In part 1, what we ended up seeing was a very clever opening from Kiwikaki that kind of happened, I would say, in 3 big steps. The first one was, oh no, the 2 gateways and the 2 cannons seem like it's a little bit too much of an expenditure early on just to secure the base. But hey, he used it to kind of set up his fast third and use it to put pressure on. The second big cool thing that he did was he went straight for the third, and even though he got messed with, he still made sure he got his third up as quickly as he could and had all these cool security mechanisms in place. And then the last big thing that I really liked was the warp prism and transition straight into passive Colossus Stalkers. Nice and passive. And now, all of a sudden, we are at this phase in the game where he is warping in things with incredible amounts of loudness, where the Zerg player essentially has exactly what he wants. He has Corruptors, he has Stalkers, he has Corruptors, he has Roaches, he has Hydras, all that sorts of good stuff. And our friendly Zerg player has his Roach Hydra Corruptor. The Protoss has all his bases up and is going for this good old Forge Corruptorness. And the question is, what now? I mean, Stephano's doing the smart move. He has an insane amount of Corruptors. And for the record, this Roach Hydra style is kind of swinging back into fashion. So, and the way that players are sort of making it fashionable again is, again, by overproducing Corruptors and then getting stupidly aggressive with the Roach Hydra mix. Superly aggressive. And you're noticing that Kiwikaki is kind of having a hard time maintaining the equal food footing. But of course, because he's Kiwikaki, that's just how he does it. Be very careful with your robo rallies. I love talking about high-level strategy, but, like, low-level strategy shit. Be really careful with these rallies. It's so easy to, like, rally right here, and your Colossus is like, oh, look, I'll wander down here. Oh, did you want me to go this way? Yeah, how about through the destructible rocks and over here and up onto this cliff and through the shrubs, and all of a sudden you have, like, a Colossus here that just dies. God, Colossi are the Dragoons of StarCraft, too. Brutal. So, alright, sweet. Continuing to apply pressure and all sorts of good jazz, but there's an interesting move that Kiwikaki makes in all of this, and that is the taking of this expansion. This expansion just gets me all super duper excited, because basically what Kiwikaki is identifying is that if we are exchanging a lot and I am not falling behind, I can simply just toss down an Expo and I can slowly start to peel ahead, because right now I know my Zerg buddy has a lot of the right side of the map from the Kiwikaki cam. And here comes the sort of nuts as hell move that we're going to see Kiwikaki do by building the Stargate. Now, I think I would say 99% of Protoss players would be able, or actually, let me actually do some better numbers. 90% of Protoss players would be doing what Kiwikaki's doing right now. They would be able to get this 4th up. They'd be able to build Stalkers and Colossus and hold down in boss mode. Another 9% would be getting this Nexus up, right? Ooh, cool. We're still taking bases. Well, we're going to smash faces with our bases. But almost nobody would end up getting this fleet beacon and going for this mothership. Now, what I don't want you to say is, oh yeah, whenever you kind of get close to max, you just get a mothership. We want purpose, right? We want a reason to get this mothership up. And the big reason we're going to see is recalls, and that's the sort of surface level description, is that, yeah, we want to do some big recalls, but the bigger reason, the bigger thing that's actually going on in the midst of getting this big-ass mothership up, which I guess, yeah, gets built out of this Nexus, is it allows us to do this expansion management in the late game. we can take more bases and we can kill off more bases. So I'm sure that you have hit this situation before. I'm trying to think of the best map possible to do. Tal'Darim Altar. Let me actually, you know what, hell, we're actually going to open up a browser window. I'm going to go to Google. I'm going to look up Tal'Darim Altar. Tal'Darim Altar. Tal'Darim Altar. Where's a nice big image? Yeah, from teamliquid.net. All right, perfect. So let's go ahead and swap on over. All right, so now we're looking at Tal'Darim Altar, right? And now that I have this image up on the screen, I'm just making sure that there's like no personal information somewhere on the screen. All right, cool. F11 this. Yeah. So let's look at this base down here, right? So here we have a natural expansion. Down here we have a third. We have a fourth that's kind of a distance away. And I just want you to think of these 4 expansions. This is generally where you'll see the players take all his bases. And the next choice of expansion, his 5th base, is kind of hard to know what the right one is. Technically, this one seems closest, but notice if you follow with my mouse how far away it is from everything. So I'm sure many, oops, yeah. There we go. I'm sure many of you have experienced the following, where you have a base, or your opponent has 1, 2, 3, 4 bases, and in your head you're just thinking, as long as I can keep him on those 4 bases, I'm in good shape, right? You'll even more explicitly state something like, if he expands here, my whole goal is to drill this area and kill that off, just so he's cut back down to these 4 bases. I know this happens a lot, because I see it all the time in silver, gold, grandmaster, pro level. Gets cut down to these 4 bases, and it's all about trying to control the 5th. So, so the reason I bring all that up is 360 public, just making a note here. Yeah, the reason I bring all that up is that if we actually come back over to this game and we look at the mini-map, a good question is, well, where the hell do we actually end up managing our expansions, right? How do we end up doing that sort of control? It seems like we're just going to have an even map split. And the answer is, we're going to see Kiwikaki just bounce up here, kill this off, and recall back. Over and over and over again. Building kind of an excessive cannons. Building himself a little teensy bit of an excess. But all that's basically alright. Stephano's still trying to be aggressive, still trying to pick off as many Colossi as he can. Replenishing with the very expensive Infestor units, kind of sacking a lot of roaches. Already having a good amount of spine crawlers up. Not an incredible amount, but just some. So here we're going to start seeing Kiwikaki's late-term plan. Right, he's holding this area, so that way he can hold his left base, he can hold his top base, and down here I'll have to build a good amount of cannons. But he's just going to be doing these basic blink ups, killing off a little bit, and then trying to blink back out again. Took a decent amount of damage, but if we can get good spotting, it's a direction that we can head in that is not, yeah, I'm just going to try to beat his face in direct confrontations in mid. If you're playing against someone who's like really solid, they're probably going to struggle with those, or you're probably going to struggle with just direct confrontations. We saw the Dark Templar try to go up, and at this point in the game, you still have to be thinking from the Protoss point of view, how do I apply pressure to my opponent? And, you know, the Dark Templar harass didn't end up working, but that's an example of it. The Blink Stalker kind of ended up working. Look at this, Stephano actually doing some really gentle road harassment. Because they have Burrow and they can do that sort of fanciness. Kiwikaki again, kind of getting ready to build some cannons. And alright, now we're going to see the awesomeness. Notice that Kiwikaki has been building only Stalkers and Colossus, not because he's an early beta Protoss and has decided that these are the only 2 units that he needs to build, but because they can easily move up and do this sort of funny monkey business. And look at that, direct target fire, literally waltzing away. Getting out, having these sentries there to be able to do that sort of backup play. And if for some reason he's in a lot of trouble, he can always recall back. Oh, yeah, and there's the recall. Sweet. So now all of a sudden, remember our example on Tal'Darim Altar? Actually, let me see if I can open up that again. Yeah, remember our example on Tal'Darim Altar? Where we were saying to ourselves, yeah, if he has these 4 bases, I'm just going to limit him and prevent him from taking that 5th. That's going to be my entire goal. Well, now Kiwikaki has a way to do that. Now Kiwikaki can say something like, yeah, anytime you take this expansion, I'm just going to waltz right up and kill it off. So suddenly, it's our 6 bases versus his basically 5 bases. Kiwikaki doing the thing that all reasonable Protosses should do, which is to flood with ridiculous amounts of gateways. To go bonkers in that regard. I would not mind a pylon and 2 cannons, and like a pylon and 2 cannons out here. I really wouldn't, because that gives us some flexibility with our warp-ins. It gives us some flexibility against those nasty little burrowed infestors. And every time we're poking up here, we're getting a little bit of free damage. And I want you to think very, very carefully about this kind of army. This Broodlord, Corruptor, Infestor army. What Protoss composition beats it? What Protoss composition beats that? No fucking composition beats that, does it? Very good. Excellent. You are on the same page as me, and I'm not actually being facetious. Like, basically there's no composition that can really deal with that very well at all. Like, none. Like, Void Rays, ooh, they get fungal growth, and the Corruptors kill them. The Broodlords kind of kill everything on the ground, and if things run up, then you just build, or you just fungal it, and then you just kill it with the Broodlords, right? It's really hard. So the best response is to not attack it. Yeah! Great concept from I Am MVP. Introduced this idea very early on in StarCraft 2. When the Zerg player gets Broodlords, I need to start using way more drops, because there's no way he can deal with me being in all those places at once. When my opponent is going for Broodlords, Corruptors, and Infestors, that army is very powerful, so what I'm just going to do is not engage it. That's right, the best way to deal with this is to not actually get involved with it. See how he's getting involved and see how not well it's going? Well, no big deal. We recall out, and now my opponent is down a base. I really do think it is essential that Kiwikaki start getting a Warp Prism here, and start getting this speed upgrade for Warp Prisms, the Gravitic Drive. This would have sealed the deal quite quickly, I believe. Especially when you have this many bases. Jeez. Also, I do think that there should be at least a Templar Archives researching Storms somewhere, because Storm's really good. Just doing some other tech patterns I think would be favorable, but I do think that the Warp Prisms are essential. Look at how high our money is. I don't mean our gas, I literally mean the minerals. We have very high mineral count, so when we start going places, we can solve this high mineral issue by burning it on Zealots with our ridiculous upgrades, and it has a very hard time handling these expansions. And what about when this kind of engagement occurs? One of the best things to do is to simply not engage this kind of army. Kiwikaki is going to be kind of bold and just kind of go for it. Thanks to these Infestors dying, like, really badly, this gives a little bit of a leg up to Kiwikaki, and he is amazingly able to repel this. I don't think that should have happened, though. I mean, we're seeing that all this is quite low on health. If there were some more Corruptors and some more Fungals landed properly, those Void Rays would have been in a lot of trouble. I actually feel like that was a little bit fortunate for our good friend Kiwikaki. And for the record, when I say that there's no composition that beats Infestor, Broodlord, Corruptor, I mean in a reasonable, even cost sort of way, right? Like, technically, Zerglings are not going to do well against Blue Flame Hellions, but if you have enough Zerglings, you're going to be okay. So that's kind of one of the advantages that Protoss has, and actually one of the big reasons why Protoss have that nice, strong Defender's advantage at this point in the game. If all my Stalkers die, I instantly warp in more Stalkers, and I can continue to push back the Broodlords. Whereas if I'm Zerg and I lose all my Roaches, I can instantly queue up a bunch of units that then have production time and then have to wander cross-map to get to you. So, Kiwikaki, in general, should be losing more just in this direct engagement here. But come to the Units Lost tab and notice how many more resources have been lost by Stephano. That's thanks to this very smart assaulting tactics up here. A lot of that smartness at the start of the game getting up his nice and early third. And what is one of the best ways to deal with this kind of army? Well, it's to not attack it. Still kind of note, Void Ray, Colossus, Stalker, all very mobile. All can walk up and down cliffs. And these poor Broodlord armies being manipulated into pulling back. And hey, look at that! In our expansion management techniques, we know that we have locked down this base basically 100%. And if he gets a little bit eager with his Broodlords, hell, we lock down this base too. Boom! All of a sudden, Stephano's looking a little bit low on minerals. And what I want you to note is look up at the top right corner. Notice how that mineral's starting to get much lower for Stephano. He was up at 5k, 4k himself at one point. Actually, more like 4k, 4k. Well, what's 1,000 anyways? But now all of a sudden, Kiwikaki is starting to get a little bit of a lead. So now, suddenly, with these Blink Stalker forces that are just basically way worse than the Broodlords, they are just getting completely slaughtered. This doesn't end up being that horrific of a deal for Kiwikaki because he has 18 warp gates and he's able to reinforce immediately. You're starting to see this logic that Kiwikaki's doing. I'm going to do the smart free kills on this base and this base. And when you engage me directly, no problem. I have one base over here. I have one base over here, which Stephano brilliantly is putting pressure on. Like, very brilliantly putting pressure on. But hey, I have all the money in the world that I can use to pick off these Broodlords. I mean, notice how ridiculously much Kiwikaki has lost in this engagement. Remember how far apart this unit loss tab was earlier on? Notice how not so far apart it is right now? It's because cost for cost, Broodlord Infestor is ridica-good. Ridica-good. And I do think Kiwikaki should have been a little bit more careful about building some cannons here. A little teensy bit more careful. Kind of ends up pulling him back and does the exact opposite of what he wants to do, which is the good old expansion management techniques. But it's kind of funny to note that just due to one not-so-good engagement, suddenly Kiwikaki is in some frowny-towny shape. He's behind on money. He can't really continue mining here. Because Stephano just has brilliant macro and great general unit control and kind of knows that the instant he gets one really good engagement with Broodlord, Corruptor, and Fester, that he is like set to go. Kiwikaki is going to stay kind of held back, pulled back. Still would have loved to see a Warp Prism sneaking down here, doing a Warp in. Very easy to pull off once you have this Gravitic Drive upgrade. Very easy. So at this point in the game, I think most people would label Kiwikaki as totally dead in the water. The one leg up that he does have is these expansions were so regularly killed off that it's actually quite difficult for Stephano to start regrouping himself. And Kiwikaki has so much gas that he's actually just going to flood High Templar and build up a ridiculous amount of Archons. Yay! And whoopsie daisy, Stephano didn't actually get that Neural Parasite upgrade. Damn. Damn. Now, we've almost been going for 18 minutes. I know, I know. So let's go ahead and do the recap of part number 2. In part number 2, what we saw was a situation that our most Protoss players would end up in right at the start of the daily. Or excuse me, right at the start of part 2. What we saw was a 4-base Protoss who's going Stalker Colossus. We saw a mini-base Zerg who was on his way to getting Hive. I think many people are familiar with this kind of situation. But what Kiwikaki started to do was to think, how can I apply pressure to my opponent? He decided to go with the Mothership. He could have elected to go with Warp Prism drops. He could have done big attacks at the front and Warp Prism on both sides. That's what Liquid Hero does. Very, 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 very well. But he went with the mobile Stalker Colossus Mothership, so he could get in there, recall out, he could blink up and walk the Colossi up and then blink back. Incorporated Void Rays as a next step, so that way he could continue with this mobile army. Didn't go for Templar or Archons, because again, he wanted that mobile army. And we saw that Kiwikaki was able to shut down expansion, shut down expansion, shut down expansion, and he was just in really, really, really good shape. Kind of going into the mid-game. But the instant he did that big engagement against the Broodlord Infestor army, things started to kind of fall apart. It's very difficult to engage that kind of army profitably. So now we're going to see the comeback of Kiwikaki in part number 3. I'll be back in 2 minutes. Whatever you do, do not go anywhere. Whatever you do, do not go anywhere at all. Because Day 9 Daily 361 part 3 coming up now.